The more successful you become, the more those doubts grow because you have something to lose at that stage. I was 27, so as I mentioned, I left that business. I handed in 3 months' notice from my corporate job. I literally set up from my bedroom on my own. Never run my own business before, and I had no money or backers or partners or anything at that stage. I was more focused around how do I get that first win under my belt? That's really where my thoughts were. So I sold a contract to Bulgari Hotel, which was a 5-star hotel in Knightsbridge, our first property services contract. It was a couple £100,000 a year, and it paid quarterly in advance, and it helped us to fund ourselves from the very beginning on a cash flow perspective. For 9 years, we hired 17 senior managers and not one of them left. We didn't get it wrong once. And my superpower, or one of them, was understanding people's motivations and whether our vehicle was going to be right for them over the long term of this business.
Okay, so Andrew, let's go back. What was the moment that you said, I'm going to build this myself? What was that final straw that ultimately made you start your business?
It's a good question. I'm not sure there's always one defining moment, because I think entrepreneurship is a lifestyle from a very early age. When I was 15, I knew I wanted to start my own business because business studies was all I was ever good at. I was also terrible at listening to other people, so I had to do it my way. There was one moment in particular. I'd worked for an SME that had been bought out by a larger organization, and I was part of that larger organization for a small period of time. And we'd been out on a corporate night out, nice dinner and drinks and stuff. And I was a little bit drunk in the back of a cab on the way back out of that dinner with the people I was, the senior team. And I just looked around and I thought, what am I doing here? I don't like these people. I'm not growing any longer. I'm not really getting anywhere in this organization. And I had just one of those moments where I looked around and thought, nah, this isn't for me. And quite shortly after that, then I handed my notice in and started Pareto from my bedroom at that stage.
Got it. And tell me again, how old were you? Because I guess doing what you've done, as people will find out over the course of the next 45 minutes, is that you didn't have a name in the industry. You didn't have a network in that industry. You didn't have any money. What doubts or voices in your head nearly stopped you from pushing through?
Well, yeah, and we all have doubts and they always go through. For me, the more successful you become, the more those doubts grow because you have something to lose at that stage. I was 27, so as I mentioned, I left that business. I handed in 3 months' notice from my corporate job. I literally set up from my bedroom on my own. Now, look, I'd already worked in that career and from the aspect of the property management sector, but I'd never run my own business before, and I had no money or backers or partners or anything at that stage. So really, because I was still a bit of an upstart at that age, 27, I'm 39 now, and I'm still an upstart these days, but a little bit less, hopefully. It was I was more focused around how do I get that first win under my belt? That's really where my thoughts were. My bigger concern probably was I had a mortgage to pay, and I had a wife that was on board with me starting a business, but obviously needed money so that we could pay the mortgage that we had, because we were just on normal incomes in a normal job to begin with. So that was more of my focus. But what that made me do was really hone in on trying to find the first deal and the first sale. And luckily for us, I sold a contract to Bulgari Hotel, which was a 5-star hotel in Knightsbridge, our first property services contract. It was a couple £100,000 a year, and it paid quarterly in advance, and it helped us to fund ourselves from the very beginning on a cash flow perspective. There aren't many deals like that around now, but in 2014, we were able to make that happen. And that's how we started, and that's how the cash flow began. And we've stayed in a positive position all the way through the journey from that point.
Did you just assume that was the average deal then, given that was your first deal?
No, as entrepreneurs, I think you beg, steal, and borrow, right? When someone... For anybody who has not started yet and you're looking for your first customer or your first couple of customers, if someone is going to believe in you enough to give you the first opportunity, you need to find the right person that's going to do that for you. But probably they will understand that you need some sort of special treatment to begin with to make it work for them as well. And in the sector I was in, it's serviced by lots of massive companies that are really terrible at delivering services to these corporates and organizations. This organization, Bulgari, was looking for something really high end. So to achieve high end, they had to help us to deliver that back to them, if that makes sense. But that's what real partnership is. And when customers and suppliers can work together to understand the fragilities of each other and how you need to deliver services well, that is the real sweet spot partnership piece for me. And for us, just as a first contract, it just worked really well. And we built off the back of that one.
And was there a point or points early on where you thought, actually, this isn't going to work? Was there, like a real low moment in those early days that nearly stopped you from actually going on that 9-year journey and achieving the exit that you did?
Honestly, I'd love to say yes, but no. I was so outwardly focused and inwardly focused on making this a success that I almost didn't have time to stop and worry about the doubts. I was so like laser focused on making it work. That's not always a good thing, by the way. It sounds good, but it's not always, because you're so driven to do things that you can't often see what's going on around you, and strategy becomes really blurry because you're just dealing with what's in front of you day to day. I think what the pushbacks you did get is, even when we got to like a 10, 15, 20 million pound business with 200 staff, people were still telling us we were too small. And that was disheartening, because when you were going to deliver services to a corporate client, and there were 5 other competitors you were against that were all 300 times your size. I mean, we were tiny compared to them. There was always this concern that even though we were brilliant, we were too small. And I used to call it being friend zoned. Like, they would take us all the way to the end and be like, yeah, we absolutely love you. You're exactly the partner for us. But corporate deem it too much of a risk to use your organization. Now, that's okay. You just have to roll with those. You accept that that's what's happened and you move on to the next one. But the way you deal with that is just go and find 3 more and then show them that they were wrong and use that negativity to keep growing. So, yeah, you have the doubts, but we went on an incredibly fast growth curve that had sometimes 300% growth each year. You don't really have chance to stop and look at what's going on. You just have to try and keep within a certain level of parameters and keep moving forward.
And have you had time to reflect now on, what were the kind of pillars that launched you on that journey, like that you clearly got very right in the very early stages, because otherwise there would have been the drop and then you would have had to restructure and rebuild again?
Yeah, look, what worked for us was, in this sector, just for reference, there's 125,000 service providers, according to ONS, and 93% of them are $1 million or lower. So there's lots of very small providers and 7% much bigger. So for me, we knew what the big companies did well and we knew what they did badly. So what we tried to focus on is being really good at what they weren't good at. And generally, that was customer service. It was treating people incredibly well. And it was ESG. Now, ESG and EDI and social value, they've all become massive phrases in the last 5 years or so. But 10 years ago, it wasn't necessarily at the forefront of people's sales patter. So for us, it was about, hey, customer, these big companies, they service you in a certain way, but tell us how you want to be serviced. Let us build our solution around what you want. It sounds really simple, but that was really innovative at the time. And then also, we are going to treat your people who work for us like heroes, because that's what they are. They're service staff that are going out of their way every day to try and deliver a great service. And also then when you add in the ESG aspect, so for me, it was social mobility. It was outwardly supporting things like LGBT plus and Black Lives Matter and mental health awareness and neurodiversity and everything that came with it, but in a very authentic way. So not just rainbow flag waving in June for Pride Month or whatever. It was actually delivering demonstrable initiatives that showed why we were better and why we were different. And in the end, we went on to deliver 150 different ESG initiatives in that time. So then when we were going in to sell to other organizations, our first few clients were the likes of Bulgari, Twitter, Deliveroo, ASOS. We had some amazing early names that adopted Pareto as an organization. So then you take those stories that I've just mentioned, you add the ESG angle to it, and you go and sell that to the next raft of organizations. And I can't use some of the names, but I'm talking, go on your phone and look at the biggest apps on your phone. We were delivering services to most of them. And that worked really well for us because we were going on a journey with them that the rest of the sector just hadn't realized was what needed to be done. And I was a charismatic salesman that could take them on that journey as well and actually deliver. And that's what worked really well for us.
Interested to know. So again, you said that 7% who, were big players and had, hundreds, if not thousands of staff. How did you attract great people to your business? Because I was just having this conversation an hour ago, but 600 odd episodes of this show, and without doubt, whoever I've spoken to, is like the hardest thing they all said is getting and then retaining. But what's your take on that and how you managed to do that, Andrew?
I got a whole podcast episode on this one alone, but I'll condense it down. 2 things: forget the CV, number 1. And actually meet people in person and understand their motives for working for you. So on the CV, a CV is a CV is a CV. And now AI producing everything, actually, they're almost not worth reading these days. For me, as long as I understood that someone had the competency to do what we generally needed them to do, I felt we could mold them in a certain way. I would much prefer to do hiring over a coffee or a burger than I would in a corporate setting in a suit and tie, because that's just not me. But secondly, it was about flipping the rhetoric around to say, why does my job work for you? So why do you want to come and work for me? What sacrifices are you making? What's happening outside of your life? What are your passions that are going to be challenged? Because I'm going to make you work very, very hard if you want to come on this successful journey with me. So really it was about trying to flip it to say, how does it work for you? And then for our top roughly 17 people that came on that journey with us over 9 years, so the top exec part of the business, we gave them sweet equity. So we gave them a part of the cut of the upside. Now, sweet equity is a great way to attract people because generally they haven't had the opportunity for shares before. And as well as that, it's a great way to retain people because that sweet equity only becomes real if they then get to their exit, and they only get their value at exit time. And if they were to leave in the meantime, then the sweet equity went with them. So the stat that is true is for 9 years, we hired 17 senior managers and not one of them left. We didn't get it wrong once. And my superpower, or one of them, was understanding people's motivations and whether our vehicle was going to be right for them over the long term of this business. And I put that down to one of the most successful parts of the business, hiring great people that wouldn't have usually got jobs in the roles that we were offering because we were looking at them in a different way from a motivation perspective, giving them a cut of the upside so that they could be part of the success journey as well, and having them there right till the exit point. And like I say, for us, on 17 occasions, we got that right over a 9 or 10 year period. And I am convinced that that stability is what helped us to grow so consistently through that time, because all that early culture was within that team. And it was hugely, hugely successful. And yeah, one of the most successful teams I've ever worked in as an organization.
Yeah, and no doubt that would have been, the precursor for that success for you. But when you started out and you nailed that first contract, as you said, how many of you were there at that point in time? And when did you then realize you needed to build that leadership team and to build the systems and processes to get you to where you ultimately ended up?
The answer is one. It was just me. Literally. When I say I was on my own, I mean, I did absolutely everything to begin with. The operations, the sales, the HR, the payroll, the supplier payments. I literally did it all. An absolute disaster, by the way. I made many, many errors stupidly. One of my errors probably was that because I was doing all the admin, you couldn't really do admin Monday to Friday because operational delivery is very busy, especially in the property sector that we're in. So I used to do it on Sundays, but that wasn't great on Sundays because although I could shut myself off, I had my family and friends saying, "Hey, Andrew, what's going on? Come and interact with us. It's a Sunday." And I was very, narrow-minded in terms of trying to get it done. And by the way, I know nothing about running a finance system. So all the payments I used to make had errors in them and I didn't pay VAT and caused a hell of a headache. So that would not be my advice to entrepreneurs now. When people say, look back, what would you change? I realized we probably got to about up to £1 million turnover when I was sort of starting to get to a point of like, right, I actually cannot focus on all these different areas at the same time. And we started to focus on bringing in administration help and bringing in some sales help and some operational account management. So it probably took us maybe, just over a year to get to that stage. So I'd run out of steam myself being able to grow it. And I understood that if we were going to go on this sort of mad journey that we were hoping to go on, we needed people. I didn't do that early enough. I should have done it earlier. I was a control freak all the way through. If you spoke to my team, I'm a nice guy and I'm very helpful, but I'm also a control freak and have to do it my way. And that's a very challenging thing for a leader to be. And since I've decompressed and looked back on my time, I can see that more now than I could then. So yeah, for me, it was about going on that journey and hiring those people. And I would do it earlier next time, especially on the basic admin stuff. Just trust people are going to do the job that you hire them to do and focus on that recruitment. So yeah, about £1 million turnover is where we started.
And was that the first hire, like an admin?
Yes, I'd done some like part-time stuff. I'd read the 4-Hour Work Week, which by the way, I I don't necessarily advocate that book because I don't think he ever actually works 4 hours. By the way, just spoiler alert, but I don't think he ever gets to that point. The sort of the concept is if someone can do it cheaper than you, then hire them to do it instead of you, which when you have no money at the start of a business, that's easy advice to give, very difficult to actually happen. So I was sort of trying this virtual idea and getting people to do bits and pieces. In the end, I just went and hired a local mum who would drop the kids off in the morning and pick them up again in the afternoon. But she was laser focused in between that time. It really worked for her, gave her an incredible work-life balance. And yeah, she was our first admin. She wasn't even a financial controller or anything. She was just a general admin. And I taught her very badly how to use the systems that I'd implemented. I had no idea about what was going on. And luckily for me, she turned out to be brilliant. And then look, as businesses grow, you start realizing, oh, actually HR is becoming a bit of a problem because in property services, the challenge is we have a number of staff. And by the end of the journey, we had 500. Today, there's over 700, right? So there's a lot of people that you're trying to control. And HR, everyone thinks is about a positive business function, but really it's about protecting the business from itself because it's the challenge of running any organization. So then organically, as we won more contracts, we usually knew 2 or 3 months in advance they were coming. We'd start bringing in more resource, that we'd fund the resource out of the future growth that was coming. So it didn't impact the immediate EBITDA. It sort of impacted the incoming EBITDA in the future. And that worked really well for us because we could see it. And we were lucky that we just had constant growth. So any roles we hired, we were able to keep bringing them on the journey with us.
And at what point in the journey did you think, I'm onto something here? This could actually go large?
That's a good question. There's a couple of times. Twitter, which before Musk was a brilliant organization that supported us from about 2016, 2017. They're one of the first contracts we won. Amazing brand, amazing people, so generous and an amazing relationship with them. They hosted our 5th birthday party for us. And so they, in their offices in Piccadilly, they paid for everything. They made us our own cocktails. They got us a donut wall. Honestly, you never hear about stories like that where the client is doing that for the contractor. It was an amazing thing. I still know the people that did it for us. I'm so grateful to them even today. They made us feel like rock stars. So at that sort of stage, that made us feel like something was happening. And we were maybe 15 million turnover at that stage. The night I knew that something was going to happen big for me in life, I guess, was we got to about 18 million turnover. I had some people buy in at that stage that were looking to exit because we created some value. We went to the market looking for some value for the business, didn't know anything about private equity or anything at the time. We thought the business was maybe worth £6 million or something. And we went out to an advisor and they got us 8 offers for the business. And we went to bed and I remember 11 o'clock at night looking through the emails and these offers had come in and they ranged from 14 million to 20 million pounds. And that is the moment when we went, oh, wow, okay, this has gone a little bit further than we thought. And it was at that moment, I'll never forget it. I was just in bed, like sort of reading this. I'm like, this can't be right. Like 14 to 20 million versus the 6 that we thought. And lucky for them, they probably could have got it much cheaper than what it was actually worth. But that's good advisors for you on the corporate finance side. So we then, the 2 other guys, they were ready to go at that stage. And the money that was being offered was more than enough for them. They were a little bit older, so they were happy to take it. For me, I knew I still had a journey in me. And I thought, well, look, if after 6 years or so, we've got to roughly 20 million valuation, if we go for another 3 years, what are we going to be able to do from there? And that worked. And then I led a management buyout at that stage so we could keep growing the business. It would have been possible for me to run off with 6 million quid at that stage and try and make that last the rest of my life. But I knew double-digit exit would be possible for me personally at that stage. And also I wanted to take the senior leaders on a journey with that sweet equity that I mentioned to get some value for them into the future as well. So it's probably that email that made me just say, yeah, this has worked and we've got further to go.
And that was just what you said, like six years into the journey that you thought you'd go out to the market and find out. Because I'd spoken to other people who, like the obvious one that comes to mind is like a Richard Reed from Innocent, who said literally from year 1 onwards they were being approached, and they just thought, right, if we're constantly being approached, let's just see how long we can hold out. And then the stupid offer comes in from Coca-Cola, and you're like, okay, well, it's game over, isn't it? You know?
Yes. Well, yeah, I think as well, those consumer businesses and product businesses are much easier for big trade companies to buy because they can easily just like lob it in. For us, it was always going to be more of a private equity play. As I mentioned on the chat before, Pareto was on the Times Fast Track 100 in 2021. So what that meant was we then started getting early approaches at that stage. We didn't really know what those approaches would mean for us and how that would all happen. So as soon as you start getting that repetitive fast growth, that is when people then start coming into you and asking questions. But when we went out to the market with our corporate advisors, we weren't desperate to sell. We were sort of just testing what was happening and were we going to go and sell it to a big trade sale, or were we going to go down private equity, as we were learning what that really meant for us. So it was an early and interesting time. And like I said, the valuations came in much more than we thought for that first part of the deal, that it was easy then to make all that happen and go again, basically, from my side.
And how did it feel handing over equity? Were there sleepless nights, or were you, sounds like maybe you're more like uber focused on this is where I'm trying to get to and this is the path we're going on?
God, there's so many emotions. For anyone who's ever sold a business for, over 8 figures, it's an interesting time because there's just millions and millions of pounds bouncing around and it all moving between accounts. I felt that I could take enough. So I took some money out at that stage. So I took a few million quid out to secure myself. And look, the first thing I did was paid my mortgage, paid my mum and dad's mortgage, paid my 2 sisters' mortgages, and basically just secured my family roots from thereafter. So I'd felt definitely one of the challenges you have as an entrepreneur, and people don't often talk about this, as your business gets more valuable, the pressure on your shoulders starts to grow. Because when you're in your bedroom on your own, who cares whether it works or not? There's nothing to lose. When you're doing 20 million turnover and 10% EBITDA or whatever, now all of a sudden, you know that you can get 8, 9, 10 times multiple of that EBITDA. And all of a sudden it's worth something. And that's then a real pressurized situation. So I think for me, I wanted to just take the risk off the table, make sure that everybody was secure. And I always felt that if it all went wrong after that, then I'd done what I needed to do, sort of pay my family back to say thank you. I had a nice house that I could live in for the rest of my life. And if I needed to go and get a normal job again, then that's what I would need to do. But we were also on this incredibly rapid growth curve. And the reason that I wasn't so nervous about handing over shares was because the investor that we had in at that time were about 18 million turnover, roughly. They encouraged us to invest £1 million in our overhead in that first year to prepare ourselves for growth, to help to leapfrog the growth forward. And in the next 2.5 years, we grew from 18 million to 42 million pounds and nearly towards 50 million.
In what time scale? Say that again, Andrew.
2.5 years. So 18 million to 42 million in 2.5 years. And the EBITDA came with it as well as we did it. We had an investment year where the EBITDA dipped, but we knew that was the plan of what we were trying to do. And we just had a huge spike off the back of that into 2023. That sort of time is when we were getting to there. So it worked. And actually, do you know what? If we hadn't have had that investment partner that was encouraging us to put £1 million into overhead, I never would have done it. As an entrepreneur, you become so precious about any sort of saving you can make around the overhead type of things. And in our business, the industry average overhead was between 10 and 12%. We were doing this on a 3.8% overhead. So like our EBITDA was approaching 14% versus an industry average of 4%. So we were able to sort of really outperform the financial metrics of other organizations within the sector, and we were better than them at the same time. So when you add this whole sort of myriad of things together, that's how our success was created. But I knew that with that investment that we put in from the investors, we were able just to go on this growth journey. And partly, I knew I had a few more years in me. I mean, I was only, 34 when that first one happened, and I was still ambitious. And we'd only just had our daughter at the time. I hadn't had our son at that stage. So we were still going on that journey. So, yeah, and that really, those 2.5 years post that first investment, when we went to our second investment, was a really value creation time for us. And, we'll continue to be successful from here.
I've interviewed Juliet Barrett, co-founder of Grenade, recently, and she was talking about different stages where they had investment into the business, and her biggest regret was the first round that they did, and the valuation that the business had, knowing what they then went on to achieve, with a I think 200 something million exit years later. But she said her biggest regret was giving too much away in that first round, but totally understandable why people would do that for, obvious reasons. What did you get right about your deal, and maybe what do you wish you'd known earlier?
So I can understand how founders would feel that way. And, life is difficult because it's not linear. So you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You can only sort of guess on that. And you just have to it's a bet, isn't it? Investment's a gamble at the end of the day. What we got right was I managed to maintain a really healthy proportion of my share through the private equity deal the first time. And I fought very hard to make sure that was the case. But also we created the 20% sweet equity for the team through that deal as well. So without that, I don't think we would have been able to maintain that team and go on this journey that we did. So that was a critical part for us. What did we get wrong? I think when you go into your first private equity deal, you need a corporate advisor that you can really trust and can explain all these things to you. Probably what we got wrong was I didn't know enough about the private equity market. I hadn't researched it enough. I hadn't met enough PEs to understand what good looked like. I was underprepared for what was the biggest financial decision I was making in my life at that early stage of the first deal. So I probably would have, if I'm looking back, I would have tried harder to understand, because it's things like, I don't know, what order do your shares rank in at exit, or how much is your loan note percentage going to be? Are you going to be paid your loan note each quarter, or is it going to come out at the end? It's all that sort of stuff, which you don't even think about when you're doing this the first time. And for me, that became a lot of conversations. And remember furlough, when furlough came in, I remember having an argument with the lawyers right at the final minute, because there was all these furlough credits bouncing around and no one knew what it meant. And they were asking us to sign warranties against the furlough. And I was like, firstly, I don't even know what a warranty is. But secondly, I don't know what the UK government's going to do about furlough. I'm not taking this responsibility, but because obviously they're the ones that have got the money and the more expensive lawyers and all that, you go through those challenges. So yes, I think better research is probably where I could have done better, but it worked out for me that the financials were way better than we could have hoped for, and it just worked from that perspective.
Nice, and congrats. If you hadn't taken that leap back then when you were 26, 27, where do you think you'd be now? What do you think you'd be doing, Andrew?
In that larger corporation I was on like the future exec scheme. And I probably would have been traveling to Germany every 5 minutes. There's a German organization, and being part of the future board there. Because I think with my characteristics, I would always throw myself into something 100%. That's just me. So probably I would have gone down that route. I don't like to think about it too much, but probably I'd have been a corporate monster, and I would have just done everything from a corporate perspective. I'm doing pretty good at it as well. But I think for me, eventually I would have fallen out with someone because I wouldn't have done what they said. And that was probably what my challenge would be.
So it could never work for anybody else ever again, and you're in that basket.
No. And imagine what being married to me is like as well. Couldn't be my poor wife I've been with for 20 years now. Who's
Bring her on. Come on.
Yeah, no, she won't go on camera. She's got too much to say. It's better that she doesn't on that.
What's your view on building a business with purpose? Do you think it's real? We hear a lot about it at the moment. People you and I have talked to before we started recording, or do you think it's overhyped? What's your thoughts, Andrew?
For me, purpose can deliver real authenticity. I touched on it earlier on. If you genuinely have a higher purpose for what you're doing, it will drive you in a way that others won't be driven by. And also, if you're selling face to face, which I did an awful lot of, that authenticity can really shine through at that stage. And it's okay if you're a bit raw. It's okay if you're not as perfect as the top 4 professional firms that are coming in after you, because that authenticity of you shows the journey that you're trying to go on. So purpose creates the opportunity for that to happen. However, there are many, many businesses that are not purpose-driven that have incredible marketing campaigns around being purpose-driven, and they'll probably be better than anything that you'll be able to create. But that eyeball-to-eyeball thing is just very important. And I did a lot of selling in the middle of COVID, and I was successful online, but I'm much better in person, because that is how you sort of get the emotion across of what you're trying to do here. And one of our other secrets, we're not really relevant here, but I'll add it in, was branded donuts. Branded donuts, so simple. I promise you, walk into a room to meet someone and have a donut with their logo on it, they will remember you for the right reasons. It is so simple. And by the way, the extra little hack, always take a gluten-free one and a vegan one as well, just to make sure you hit all those points on the other side of the room. So simple. But in 2019, we spent £25,000 on donuts. Absolutely true. And it was a core part of our success. And it's no wonder that I got as fat as I did in the middle of everything that was going on as well. But yeah, that's, that face-to-face sales bit is incredibly powerful. And donuts was just a silly way that we did that.
Yeah, do you know what? I remember first when I was with Virgin Startup, and we started in a new workspace, and I could remember like new people. We were like the first tenants in the building, but I could remember new people coming in, and I don't know who started it, but somebody did that. They came in with like a box of donuts, and before you knew it, of course, from instead of just kind of shuffling in on their own and having a desk in the corner somewhere, not knowing anyone, and then hovering over the coffee machine, and you're like, "How long have you been here?" They literally knew 20 people straight off the bat. So I can see why that would work for sure.
Yeah. And like, it's just we used to use Crosstown, because Crosstown did a really good like personalization service on the donuts. And worked really well. Worked every time. I never met somebody who's like, oh, I hate donuts. They were usually taking them home for their kids. And then they're thinking about you when they get home as well, right? This is what all these little 1% sales things. It's always about how to be memorable in the right way and stand out.
And how much did your purpose change over the years then? Because obviously your personal circumstances have changed over the years as well. So compared to 27, fast forward to mid-30s or whatever.
I think I'm way more aware now of my impact on the environment than I was before. I'm very fortunate now. I go on lots of trips and holidays and all that sort of stuff, and fortunate to have a couple of cars and things. You realize that actually the footprint you're leaving behind is quite significant, and what you're using, certainly with the travel. That didn't play in my mind so much originally. It did as time went on. And it's partly why Pareto, we will be the first net zero provider within the facilities sector. And whereas most competitors are looking at 2050 still. So we really brought that forward. And since I finished a couple of years ago, I bought a farm. We planted our own forest here, so 1,500 virgin trees last year. We just bought a nature reserve that we're growing into as well within the land that we have. And I want to educate the kids that, I want them to spend time growing carrots in the garden as opposed to playing on an iPad and or taking the quad bike out to pick some berries and then make some jam or whatever. That's what my purpose is now. That wasn't my purpose initially. And I didn't think twice about my carbon footprint early on in terms of what was going on. So I've always believed in social mobility, and I always will do, in terms of promoting the right people and giving low-wage people an opportunity and treating people well with equity and diversity. But that's always been the same, and it will do for my whole life. But the sustainability angle certainly changed as I went through.
And what's next for you? You talk about, having had a couple of years to kind of reflect on that exit and buying the farm and the nature reserve. Your kids are growing up, but still very young, obviously. What's in the pipeline, or are you still figuring those pieces out?
I'm not in a rush any longer, which I always was in a rush before to have the answers. Where I'm at right now, I'm enjoying a few things. I'm enjoying the mundaneness of taking the kids to school, doing their swimming, helping them with their homework. But what I mean by that is putting my phone away, forgetting about it, and actually being in the moment with them. And as a parent, in my very, very busiest times, I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't present, and I didn't always want to be there, and I wanted to focus on other things. I really found myself in that, and I absolutely love it. And it's become very important to me now in terms of what I'm doing. I also sacrificed a lot with my friends, because my friends, who are same age as me, but last 5 years or so, I've just focused on everything but them. They were like right down to the bottom of the agenda. And it'll be of no surprise I was one of the main organizers in the group, because I'm so organized around what I was doing. So for me, I've been really, really making an effort to reconnect with them. And so what I do now is I'll be like, look, give me 2 nights in October that you're all going to be available. I'll arrange a trip to Europe. You can all pay for it, but I'll arrange the trip. I might upgrade us to first class on the train or something, but whatever. And actually just doing the mundane stuff. I was just in Naples and Rome over the weekend with them, just reconnecting, asking those questions and just being part of it. So those things I'm finding very powerful, and I take a lot of gratitude from those. The other thing really now is I feel there's some power in the story of working class background to be able to manufacture an exit by the age of 37. There is nothing special about me. I just worked incredibly hard, and I want to tell that story that anybody that's trying to get out and do something to make their lives better, I believe that's possible. and I had nothing to sell. I had no book to promote. I had none of that sort of stuff. It's just I'm trying to tell the story and see where that leads me, because I'm meeting some really interesting people at this time. And yeah, it's a fascinating position to be in. I don't know the answers though. I'm really happy with that being the case at the moment.
For those people who are listening or watching, and they've got an idea, they want to take action, but for whatever reason they haven't taken the leap like you did. What's your advice to those people? Because everybody has ideas, right? But very few people actually action it.
I would have a really deep conversation with yourself. What are you willing to lose by doing it? Because I'm not really a negative person, but I'm always thinking about the worst case scenario. So for me, honestly, I had a house, I had a marriage, and I had my friends, right? So really I was willing to sacrifice all those things as a 27-year-old. And what went through my head was, well, if it all goes wrong, I'll go back to my mum's house, I'll go back to the bedroom that I started in, and I'll do something else, because I believe in myself that I'm a competent person, and I'll go and do some other things. Have that conversation with yourself very sincerely, because you need to know what you're putting on the line. And then you need a bit of a financial plan. So how long are you going to give yourself to make it work? Now, what I mean by that is, can you go down to 4 days a week at work and 1 day a week at work? You start with this thing. And then when you find your first Bulgari hotel, for example, then you go and you launch and you go off the back of there. Can you save up, 6 months of money that you're going to be able to live on, and then throw yourself into it for 6 months and see what happens? You just need a little bit of a plan and a fallback position. And that's why it's important to understand your risk position. What's the worst case scenario? And you've then got a bit of a balance with, are you going to be okay if you get to that worst case scenario? But probably you won't, and you'll land somewhere in between what amazing looks like and what terrible looks like. But yeah, have a bit of a plan. There's a lot of internal monologue. I wasn't very good at talking to people about this. It was all going on in my own head. And because I knew that if I asked people about it, they'd say no. And look, most people you talk to, they say that's a wonderful idea, but it's also a terrible idea, because you've got all this financial security that you're going to lose. And that's it. And when you throw kids in the mix, it adds a whole different level of emotional challenge to it as well. So yeah, I also don't think it's ever too late. I know when my kids have grown up and gone to university and I'm 50 or whatever, I think actually that might be an interesting time to start another business, because you've got a whole load of business experience, a load of life experience, and then, a good 10 years to try and throw something together. So, quite interested by that, but just not for now.
Yeah, and there's obviously plenty of examples of people who've gone on and done that. Funnily enough, we were just talking to offline, Simon Woodruff, I think he was in his 50s when he started Yeah Sushi, So just a little quick fire round to finish up the last few minutes that we've got, Andrew. So first thing that comes into your head, what is an entrepreneur for you? How would you define an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur is someone who is willing to make sacrifices and take risks to achieve a higher success that isn't possible without doing so.
Perfect. What is a scale-up business for you?
Scale-up is someone that's growing at least 50% year on year and holding on by the seat of their pants as they do so. That's what scale-up means. That's what it means.
I like that one. What does this country need to do to get more scale-ups?
Entrepreneurial education early on, and making people realize it's okay to go and start a business, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but going outside the traditional routes of apprenticeships and universities and just having a go. I think there's so many great people in the UK that would succeed with that, but they get onto the corporate curve of going to university and graduate schemes and work and then never get off again. And that's a challenge.
Why do you think the US is better at producing scale-ups and unicorns than the UK?
Well, I'll give you a very real example, because their multiples at exit are bonkers compared to what they get here. So the US has a much bigger exit multiple on EBITDA. So your opportunity for risk, significantly more. I'm aware of like a pest control business that was hardly doing anything, getting a 20 times multiple on their EBITDA. So if I'm only getting, 10 here or whatever, and then I may as well go to the US and have a go. You may just win the lottery at the end.
Last question for you. And this can be somebody from the past, or it can be somebody right now. But which founder or founders inspire you the most?
It's a really good question. I can't remember their name. Whoever wrote The Beer Mat Entrepreneur, I think they did the Cobra Beer Mat Entrepreneur Early Doors. That was one of the first books I read within business that was really accessible and really easy to understand. And the whole concept was it was written on the back of a beer mat in terms of their business plan. That probably gave me some thought process that I could do it because I was young, scrappy, and hungry as well. And I could go on that journey. So that book, whichever entrepreneur that was linked to, the Beer Mat Entrepreneur, that's where it started. And that's probably 20 odd years ago now, that book.
Wow. I don't know that one. I know Cobra Beer because I've interviewed Lord Billamoria, but I don't know that one. Okay.
It might not have been Cobra. It may have been a different beer. But yeah, that's what it was called. It was a while ago, but I remember the front cover. It was just an inspiring book to read from like a scrappiness perspective.
Fantastic. Well, look, love chatting to people and hearing their stories. Everybody's got, a different start and an exit point. And it's good to get somebody like yourself at a very, interesting juncture at their life, shall we say, where, like you say, unlike a lot of people that come on here, you're not trying to sell something. It's kind of unfiltered. It is what it is. It's this snapshot of where we caught you in your life. And I find that really interesting. So really appreciate your time. Any last thoughts you'd like to share before we sign off, Andrew?
No, I think what I always say is entrepreneurship sounds very grand, and there's all these amazing stories on TikTok and YouTube and everything that you'll watch. There is a whole host of hard work that goes into even getting to that stage. Don't underestimate the amount of effort it takes to get to that. And where you may see people who look amazing online, a lot of the reality isn't real. And you just need to actually take that jump and do it and have a go and create your own stories, and the success will come off the back of it. But yeah, don't believe everything you read online is probably the overarching thing. And as I raise kids into this world, it's probably one of the most important lessons that they're going to need to take now.
Yeah,
and also get a blind that's not open with the sun coming in your eyes as well as you sit in your podcast room.
Notice that now. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Andrew Hulbert, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
If this conversation resonated with you, don't just sit there, act on it. Make sure you follow or subscribe for more game-changing conversations, and remember, the only thing standing between you and your business breakthrough is the decision to screw it and just do it.